So, thank you. It was great. Enjoyed greatly reading this and thinking about this. I got it late, but I think I got some...
You got it early, you don't know.
Got it.
Usually I bring it with me.
Okay, so you see how privileged I am. I especially like the idea to build this around the sustainability issue, which is much talked about but not well understood very often. Also the distinction between fiscal or financial sustainability and social sustainability, I think, is worth reflecting. Very often in the everyday usage of the, from starting with the Brundtland report and all the political talk about sustainability, very often it's mixed up with desirability or social and political desirability. And of course it's not. It may be highly undesirable what may be a requirement of sustainability. It's also very often mixed with adequacy or social acceptability or fairness, justice, actuarial fairness, which is a different conception of justice than other concepts. So there is lots of confusion about it, and I think to think about this is worth doing, and I very much share this basic distinction. Maintain a system going, so to speak, which in itself, given the issues at stake, is already a great achievement if you could succeed doing this in Israel. Now, you say financial sustainability, and also it's an insurance-based social security system, which is the very essence of social security and social insurance, and the beverage idea, and the welfare, founding fathers of the welfare state idea. So this is what this is all about. So in a way it should be balanced. The question is if financial sustainability means that the benefits of our old generation enjoys today will be passed on to the grandchildren. What is a benefit? In the context of a pension system, we have seen how many dimensions it covers. But if you only thought about pensions, which is just one among many, many, many dimensions, I could think of four instantly. One is the annuity, so pensions. We've seen that, there's even the language is sometimes confusing. So what the monthly paycheck or the annual paycheck you receive. And this may be terribly low. In some very rich countries, up to 70% of women in particular, till today, are just around or just below the poverty line. And the richest of the new European Union member states, which is Cyprus, which is not very rich, but it's better than the other, so have recently joined, more than around 60% of the population, 65 plus, lives below the poverty line. So what does it mean? What is, but, people, Cypriotic people would contest that, and they say, well, it's not a fully monetized economy, and there's so many other fringes, and people are not at all unhappy, and they're long living, and they dance, and they smoke, and still get very old. So they would contest this. But in sheer numbers, you find these incredible poverty rates. Lifetime pension wealth is something totally different. And so in the country I come from, for instance, the women over the life cycle, compared to men's income, they start out with 18% less, which is the gender pay gap, the pure discrimination, so to speak. Same job, you start, same qualifications, and you immediately start with 18% less, and then it accumulates after the first baby pause, you are down to 2/3 of the salary. And once you retire, right now you're around 50% of a man's income, which of course is a shame for us men. On top of that, women do most of the work, which is unpaid. And this is the first generation, I think the same in Israel, of women and mothers who do paid work and not just unpaid work. But the majority of women, till this very day, also in Israel, I checked the data, do most of the work being unpaid, and the minor part of the work being paid. So when you look at their annuity benefit, it's half the man's. If you look at the lifetime income, it's better than men's, significantly better. In Greece, it's $609,000 as against men, I don't know, 400 or 500, whatever. So because they're living longer, and very often they're very generous survivor pension regimes, very generous in Germany or in the Netherlands or in Austria. Not at all, non-existent in Sweden. It's a modern system, individualized system. So you get one lump sum, maybe if you're a widow at a very young age, if I understand this properly. But basically, you have no lifetime income starting maybe at the age of 27. My head of finance, for instance, our institute, she was a widow with 27. She never remarried. So she had a very good working income and a very good widow's income at very young age. Lifetime, and this may go on for 70 years, being a widow in addition to having a working income. So the question is, and if you take the two together, then of course women's lifetime pension wealth may be so much higher than men's, depending on, or a third way to measure it is right to payments relative to contributions. And in some countries, including the one I come from, you're promised 50% higher entitlements than are covered by contributions. This is your last charts. How much is not the reserve, but as the current flow of social security contributions, how much are they overspent, so to speak, in terms of entitlements, social rights given to the population. A fourth one would be the replacement rates, net replacement rates, gross replacement rates, pensions relative to the income, the last income, or the average income you had over the life cycle. This in itself, maybe if you have steep age wage curves, maybe make a difference of half of it. Whether you have 80% of your last income or 80% of your average lifetime income, if, say, in Austria, the mid-50 person earns 2.5 to 3 times as a young 25-year-old person, it makes all the difference. It's much lower, in the Netherlands or in Sweden or in other countries. So depending, it may even go down in the UK after a certain age. So depending on whether the age-wage curve is like this, like alpine slopes, or like, in the Polder model, or even, it makes, so the question is net replacement rate, gross replacement rate relative to what kind of income. So it's only 4. I gave you just 4 examples. And when we look at the forecast of the OECD, which was mentioned today, well, on average of the 34, Israel included now, OECD countries, the life expectancy gains are supposed to be till 2030 about 20%. The lifetime pension wealth will increase significantly between 7 and 10%, whereas the annuity, so to speak, the monthly paycheck will be 10 or 11% less. So are pensions being worse or better? It depends on what you look at. Is it the lifetime pension wealth, which I would plea for being the real measure, or just the monthly paycheck, which is handed out 29 years instead of 21 years? Including a very generous survivor's pension. So okay, I think the issue is quite clear. Everything depends on what is a benefit and what is. Now, you also say, again, I agree, of course. How can I not? With how to share that with current generations and future generations. How many generations are there currently? It's not just one generation, not just the pensioners. 1 to 2 generations, if the average life pension durations is 27.5 years in France, this is more than a generation. And we know it. And then, of course, there are several generations in active life, and there's one generation before entering the labor market, at least. So you have 4 to 5 generations to share it out who are currently alive, and not those who are just born and may live with their girls beyond 100 years. So, again, the poverty and inequality will probably, according to all the models I have seen, be increasing, and not just in Israel or in Turkey or in the US, but in most, including very egalitarian countries like Sweden or Austria. even there, the forecasts, of course, are the inequality and poverty will increase, and they cannot elaborate on why this will be the case. When you look at your projections, the biggest increase, of course, is for the long-term care, and this is, I think, most plausible. You assume that maternity and child benefits and unemployment, all of this is going down, partly significantly. Unemployment almost...
You don't assume it. It's in the model.
Okay, but how do you know how unemployment rate in 2035? Okay, but yeah, but it shows that this is going down, others are going up, and among long-term care is the single most important upward trend. The question is, how is this to be explained? Looking up the Israeli data, my working hypothesis would be it has to do with the aging of the aged. So when I was young, I think 7, whatever percent of the Israelis above retirement age would have been above 80. Now it's 22 or so, more than 3 times. But within one more generation, this will be 31 or a third. 1 in 3 Israelis will be above the age of 80. 1 of 3 Israelis in retirement age, which means beyond 67, which is a lot. Of course, this is a quote a natural phenomenon. It's a very frequent phenomenon. That the older you are, the more, the number of those population shares increases. And this in itself may, even if we have a compression of morbidity, even if we have less, the onset of frailty will be later and so on. In absolute numbers, the number of people who are a little bit gaga, who may be disoriented, who may need some help, who may in absolute will increase in absolute numbers very, very significantly, and this in itself may be. Last point to the employment rates. You assume that women will adopt a male pattern of, so to speak, today's male pattern in 50 years' time, whereas men will continue to work so much longer than women do, despite the fact that they may not, which is a courageous... Okay, but maybe, yeah. So this is will men continue to work this 5 years longer? Also, the gender gap, I don't know, but I think you mentioned that this may be not standardized for working hours. If the gender pay gap would be, is this standardized? Is this?
No.
Is part-time is not taken into?
We don't have data on hours worked except in the surveys, which are not interesting for us.
Yeah. So because otherwise, the gender gap is very impressive or shocking. So it's really, wow. Whether this is going to, whether Israeli women will put up with this, let's see. Okay. Last point is reserve ratios. Yes, you're really lucky. You're a long-living but still young society, so you could build reserves. And the example you gave was compared with the Germans, who are not as long-living and not as young, much not less young. So yes, this is a great chance. The chance of the good news I hear, this is the first time I hear that this is this big sharp increase with Haredi men and Arab women, because I have the same cliches and stereotypes that some people just don't work, and so I thought they are not working. And to finish the story, we have been recently invited to Turkey to look for their kind of fitness to join the European Union and so on in the social security area. And at very first glance, of course, everything looks fine with a young society, with great economic success and growth rates and so on. But when you look in more detail, for instance, the labor force participation, or those who contribute, the millions of people in the agriculture who don't contribute because they are informal labor. So then all this miracle, so to speak, collapses totally, because this is a young society with great opportunities, except that they don't use them. So Turkey just doesn't, and Greece is an example well known, and so I hope Israel is so much better than.
Thank you. Your question? Yeah, thanks. I found this very interesting, this projection issue there. Now, I have just two quick questions on that. One is, I mean, these amounts that go up there of let's say, of the benefits, I mean, these are averages, obviously. So, I mean, do you have any kind of sense of how the subgroups are diverging? Like, I mean, whether there's a diverging process or whether it's a convergence process. For example, I know that the Belgian Federal Planning Bureau has also done some micro-simulation model of looking at the social sustainability of the pension system, where they put like a micro-simulation model on top of their macro general equilibrium model. And what they find is essentially that the longer you project, the more convergence you have. I mean, it's essentially everybody will be equal, essentially, at the end of the day. And so that's one thing. And the second one is regarding the demographics, but also then indirectly regarding the benefit entitlements. So the family compositions are changing quite dramatically. And so you have more and more separated, remarried, recomposed families and so on, with the consequences in many countries regarding the dependent benefits. So, I mean, right now there are lots of these issues, like, you know, if a man was married to 2 or 3 women during the cycle of his life, you know, who will be entitled to what fraction of the dependent benefit, and so on and so on. Who will get a survivor's benefit? Yeah, will both get a survivor's benefit? Is there a cap on it, and so on? So, I mean, do you integrate that in your projection? Like these issues, like of changing patterns. I mean, just the changing patterns. So, I mean, even if you want to resume to simpler patterns, like singles, rather than something else. Thanks.
Thanks. Just one minor question, which is in computing reserves. Do you are the reserves credited some interest rate? Is it they're given to the government, I assume, or they're invested in government bonds?
And I found it very optimistic, not to say too optimistic, but about the ultra-Orthodox. What do you assume about their participation rate? I mean, it seems very high participation rate even for 209, and not data that I was aware of. So for 259, it seems, for me, too optimistic. 2059, it seems, for me, too optimistic.
Okay, so I'll start with some of your points, which I think all of the points that I received here are very well taken, and we are really very much in the beginning of our exercise. Only getting the model started is a big thing, and we will have, it's like a steady project that we have to have a group of people studying it. But I'll give some comments to what you said. About the poverty today in Israel, all of you know that the poverty in Israel is at the high end. We are with Turkey and the US and Mexico, both in inequality and poverty. And that puts a lot of strain on such analysis, because if that is the case, and we're talking about the scenario of no change for the time being, just forecasting, so this means that if we have a problem, let's say, of old age poverty, we have 25% of old age poverty in Israel, according to the OECD standards of calculating poverty. We do this also in our poverty report, whereas in the OECD, the same definition gives you 15%. So we are 10% above it, and this is a good case. We have the young people, we have the working age families, where we have way up higher poverty rates. our total poverty rate of the economy, which is 20%, say 19.8, is twice as high as the OECD rate, which is around 11%. So almost twice as high. So in the old age, we are already in a good situation, but it's a very bad situation. So if we are strained in that, it means, as you said, if we don't change anything, and this is what you said about the normative issue, or is it the desirable, is it adequate, or is it just social sustainability, then we will experience social non-sustainability. We haven't calculated it yet, but this is what's going to come out of this exercise, and I hope that this creates a process of correction in the government, which I can't see very much. Until now, the government, I should be careful, but the government policy is using the cheap line, saying, oh, come on, your data are rubbish, you don't know what you're talking about, people are hiding the money below the table, etc., etc. This is much cheaper than paying benefits and then doing anti-poverty policy. It's much easier and much cheaper. And this is what's happening not all of the time, because the government has decided for on some very important issues. They have introduced a negative income tax, which is not comparable to the US earned income tax credit, because it's much, much lower, much less generous, but it's a start, and it's an important start. In 2012, it's going to be nationwide. We have a pension system, how do you say, compulsory pension since 2008, which is a very important thing, but we have to enforce it. We have a minimum wage which is badly enforced, but now, yesterday, there has been a law pushed through, and also 120 more controllers in the economy will be introduced in the economy in order to improve the enforcement of the minimum wage and other labor laws. So these are very important things that are happening. How effective they will be in the longer run, we don't know. As to the comment about convergence and divergence, if I understood correctly, what you are asking is whether we have probability, whether we have distributions, or we are just working on determined numbers. I mean, determinate numbers. At this stage, we're working only on a deterministic model, and probabilistic model even of the that is a part of this exercise we are going to do. Then we will have probabilities, and then we can look at the variances, etc. But I think this is going to be much more complicated, and I don't know whether it will converge or diverge. As to the family composition, I think this is still to be done in the future. I don't know how important it is in Israel. We have a relatively religious society, both in the Jewish world and in the Arab world, so people are getting divorced, but I think we are not yet in the Western patterns, but I'm not sure about this. About the reserve computation, you were asking what?
Invested in government bonds?
Yeah, okay. We are. It's a big question right now, because we had a commission, and I cannot go into the details of this now because there's no time, but basically we have reserves which are fully reinvested in government bonds, and they are non-tradable. And they are even, to some extent, by some people in the government, they don't even agree that these bonds are relevant. They say, yeah, you have these bonds, we have written them somewhere else, but we've built schools and hospitals, and we don't have this money. And if you want this money, and we see from the chart that I showed you that until now we didn't need it. We slowed down the increase, but it still increased, and it's still going to increase for another till 2020 or so, but then it's going to go down, and we are going to need somebody on our bond, yes? We're going to need help on that, and if they say now that they are really, they don't want to consider it, so I can only tell them, look, This is something that a country not very far from us has been doing. They have been saying, sorry, we don't have these pension funds. They're called Greece. And it's not what Israel wants to be. And I always tell them, until now, you paid every cent in time, interest and repayment. Interest payments are in Israel today 7.5 billion shekels that are in our revenues. They say this is government money. I say no, this is contribution money. We are giving it to you, so you have to pay. But we would be glad if, like in other countries, we could invest it through the Bank of Israel in the world. So this is about that. About the optimistic ultra-Orthodox assumptions, we have not yet made a segmented model. It's a general model right now. We started to analyze the employment functions of the ultra-Orthodox, the Arab women, etc., etc. We were very surprised when we saw this. These are actual data of the finance ministry, of the tax payments of people, so we know what they earn. And this is what it looks like. That's what it looks like. So it's true that... This is a very good question. We have had a big argument about that. Okay.
I don't think we can go into it.
No,
now.
okay.
Yeah.
Next time.
We'll have to
Afterwards.
wait until the...